There's foods that you can eat that can increase your metabolic rate by 10%. We're talking serious increases in your resting energy expenditure. That's without exercise, that's without dieting. These are just foods that can increase your actual resting energy expenditure. Now, a lot of times dietary induced thermogenesis, which is the heat that's created just from food, is kind of brushed off as just this minuscule thing. But that's if you're just eating regular food. These simple foods can make a big difference. And this is where there's sort of a convergence of Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, because in the Eastern world, there's things that's talked about like yang foods, foods that increase yang energy or more heat or circulation or blood flow, right? Now, on the Western side, you look at that as dietary-induced thermogenesis, foods that might increase circulation. So there's a convergence here, and it really actually matters. So some of these things that we eat to increase body heat can actually increase our overall fat loss. So let's go ahead and jump in with the first one, which is one that you may have heard of before. It's simply capsaicin, chili powder, chili peppers, hot sauce, paprika. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I am going to talk about this one because it's important, because it outlines the mechanism in which most of these foods increase metabolic rate. This study was published in the Archives of Biochemistry and Biophysics, and it took a look at capsaicin consumption and found that it activated something called the TRPV1 receptor. This is a receptor that sort of receives pungent or spicy things in a way and activates the nervous system. So how does this impact our temperature? Well, when our nervous system gets kicked on, it can do all kinds of things, but let's break this study down a little bit more. They found that capsaicin increased what's called ATP-dependent thermogenesis, which means that it's actually channeling more energy to be created by the mitochondria. So there's another form, which is called like an ATP-independent or uncoupling protein or brown fat activation, which is a really powerful thing too, but this is different because this actually just means that these foods are actually increasing metabolic rate by increasing the amount of energy that is literally created. So what they found with this is that there was an activation of what are called alpha and beta adrenergic receptors. If you're familiar with fat loss science at all, these are really important compounds or really important receptors, right? This is what norepinephrine and like these different catecholamines bind to kickstart fat loss. Now, this happens as a result of this TRPV1 receptor getting activated. So the long and the short of it is the spiciness hits these receptors that cause the nervous system to turn on, similar to like exercise. And all of a sudden, these beta and alpha adrenergic receptors are activated and we burn more fat. So this happens with spicy food in general, right? Like you probably have felt it. You consume something spicy and your head rushes, you turn kind of red because of more blood flow, you feel hot. This is a real thing. And this is in many ways what in the Eastern philosophy would be called like yang energy, right? It's more a focus of creating heat. So there's that cool convergence there. Now the next one is one that has become my favorite. Ginger. Now, ginger is different because it acts in a different way. Now, if you eat ginger, you feel that fire, right? But it feels different than if you eat something spicy. It's like a whole different ball game. It's like more like kind of how horseradish is too. It's like, it's spicy, but it's like, it's doing something, right? Well, there's some cool evidence to back this up with ginger. This was a randomized controlled trial that was published in the journal Metabolism. And what they found with this study was they gave subjects just a regular breakfast, and then they gave them either 2 grams of ginger powder in warm water or a placebo. Okay, and they measured their resting energy expenditure for 6 hours, and they took blood samples at 3 hours. Essentially what they found is that the resting energy expenditure went up so much that the group that had just 2 grams of ginger ended up burning 42 extra calories in the day than the group that didn't. Nothing else changed other than they burned more calories at rest. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, 42 calories, but when you consider what that looks like over the course of a year, that's almost 4.5 pounds burned of fat in a year just by adding ginger powder, right? So what's happening here? Well, for one, major activation of that TRPV1 receptor. So central nervous system activation, sympathetic nervous system, all of a sudden you're turned on, right? So even if you're sitting there, your resting energy expenditure goes up. Really, really cool. But they also found their hunger scores went down and satiety went up. So they are also satiated. So not only did they have an increase in their energy expenditure, there's a very, very, very good chance that they had a decrease in the amount they consumed. So this 4.5 pounds per year would be a conservative estimate, considering that appetite would probably go down too. Now, I put a link down below for a place where I shop for a lot of my groceries, including things like paprika, all my spices, things like that. It's called Thrive Market. That's a 30% off discount link. So that 30% off discount link gets you your entire grocery order at that discount, plus a $60 free gift when you use that link down below. So they specialize in getting cleanly sourced products. So the food they have there, the spices they have there, there's no hidden nasty stuff in it. It's not like when you go to a regular grocery store and there's going to be random, natural flavors in your paprika. It's like, well, who wants that, right? The point is they are really trying to make good, healthy food accessible to all people. So that link is down below, 30% off plus a free gift. So whole grocery order, 30% off in that top line of the description. Next one is wild, okay? Because if you look again at the Eastern side and you look at foods that are good for yang energy or that possess that, right? You're going to see onions and garlic there. But now we're seeing on the Western side, in the evidence-based models, like we're seeing onions and garlic contain quercetin and also something called allicin, which are tremendous for blood flow, but also have other properties too. So check out some of this research. This study was published in Genes and Nutrition, and it was a rodent model study, but they gave rodents either a high-fat diet to make them obese or a low-fat diet, combined with either straight quercetin powder or red onion powder. What was wild is that the red onion powder had a dramatic effect on increasing energy expenditure, but more importantly, decreasing fat mass accumulation in the group that they were trying to make obese. It actually protected against gaining fat because it increased their energy expenditure so much. But one of the more important things that they found is that it increased the number of mitochondria in their muscle cells. The mitochondria is where we manufacture energy. So it actually increased the number of energy factories in the muscle with more mitochondria, so they were able to create more energy. This is not only good for fat loss, but it's good for metabolic health in general. Now, another food is clove or clove oil, and that's because it has something that's called eugenol. Now, this is still going to hit that TRPV1 receptor, still working along that same pathway, but it's really fascinating how it works. There's actually documented research that this eugenol or clove changes muscle fiber type. So we have type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. Type 1 are more endurance, type 2 are more strength. Type 1 is going to have more mitochondria, better for fat burning, right? What they found is that this actually increased the number of type 1 muscle fibers. Not to the point where you're not going to be a strength athlete anymore and you're just going to magically just run marathons. It's not like that. But by doing this, it's increasing the number of mitochondria. So we actually saw this with the literature too. So when it came down to cloves and eugenol, there was more mitochondria once again. More mitochondria just simply means more places for fat oxidation and fat burning to occur. Okay, so this means that more healthy metabolism, just overall more nutrient partitioning and being able to use fuel properly. Now, probably the most interesting one, and one that I inherently was always using, was mustard. Now, you can't just use regular yellow mustard. Okay, you have to use the mustard that is going to have like the seeds in it, right? Because with mustard, to get the actual TRPV1 effect, you need what is called, it's a funky name, but it's allele isothiocyanates, also known as AITCs. These AITCs activate both the TRPV1 receptors and something known as a TRPA1 receptor. Okay, these are, once again, receptors that receive the signal from something pungent. But mustard is so wild. So we've even seen in some literature when they take mustard and they apply it to the skin compared to warm water or compared to some other compounds, they actually find that mustard increases the heat in the skin. When they actually screen it, they can see there's more heat on the skin. But we've seen it, of course, in the actual ingested literature too. I just wanted to show something different. Because if you look at the Eastern side, mustard is seen as something that prevents energy blockages, right? It's supposed to allow energy to flow more through the body. And it actually makes sense from a Western side too. So there was a study published in Bioscience, Biotechnology, and Biochemistry that found that AITC, this active compound in mustard, would actually activate ATP-dependent pathways for creating energy and increasing heat. So essentially, it was driving up body heat directly. This ended up increasing thermogenesis, ended up decreasing the heat diffusion. So heat just didn't diffuse the same way it normally would. So it would cause an increase in body heat by decreasing the diffusion. And it would increase the amount of uncoupling. So basically more energy would just get diverted into creating heat. So mustard, not only that, also had really powerful effects on appetite suppression. So we're talking a really interesting compound here with mustard. And again, bodybuilders have been using mustard for a long time just to curb their appetite and give themselves some kind of sensory satisfaction. So very, very fascinating there. So now we have to look at the other side of these things. We know that these foods can increase fat loss via these mechanisms. There's also benefits from the gastric side, right? So there's huge benefits when it comes down to motility. These same things I talked about, anytime you activate the TRPV1, you increase motility, the movement of things through the gut, which is also part of this whole yin and yang thing that we talk about from the Eastern side. So being able to move energy and move waste and move things through, which is really interesting because that is also a way that you support the immune system. When you have less endotoxins that are staying in the gut because they're moving through faster, you have less risk of sort of a chronic inflammation state. So, the whole thing, it all starts in the gut, right? So you're improving the gut health, you're improving the overall immune system. Not to mention, actually just increasing dietary-induced thermogenesis is going to increase circulation, increase the trafficking of immune cells and macrophages so they can actually get into the nooks and crannies and do what they're supposed to do. So there's evidence that by having more of these dietary-induced thermogenesis foods, we might be able to deliver immune cells to where they need to go better. And then, of course, you have the mitochondrial aspect. You're increasing your mitochondrial density, the amount of mitochondria. That means more energy can be produced. More energy can be produced to also aid your immune system and help you out there. So there's more to it than just a woo-woo-y kind of yin and yang thing. Eating foods that increase body heat is something that we've seen in ancient writings for thousands of years. But then now we're seeing it in the Western side as something that's a little more pragmatic and practical and applied. So really interesting stuff. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.